This podcast may contain adult language, adult situations, spoilers, and some brief nudity, so parental guidance is suggested.
We have such sights to show you.
After about 5 minutes of this movie, you're gonna wish you had 10 beers.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
So, what would you little maniacs like to do first?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Oh, well. La-di-da, la-di-da, la-la, yeah.
Welcome back to the Cinema Recall Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cinema Recall Podcast. I am the Vern. Thank you so much for listening, watching, subscribing, all that you are doing. Appreciate you very much. So this episode is very cool because I'm combining two episodes into one, and both of them feature a wonderful YouTuber, film critic, cult film aficionado, and a little bit of my celebrity crush. It is Cayley from OnceOverwithCayley, and this is very cool because she's been on our past episodes talking about Howard the Duck and Dogtooth, and I'm going to be playing for you one of my guest spots on her episodes. So she brought me on to talk about the film Society, the very fun, very liquidy body horror film from Brian Usna, and so I'm going to be playing probably the first portion of that review, and then I'll post links in the show notes so you can go to her channel and watch the full review of Society, and it's very cool. Stay to the end because there is a fun trailer that she made with the help of her friend, and that's very cool, so definitely watch that on her YouTube channel. And then after the break, I'm going to be playing for you my guest spot on the LAMBcast, where I propositioned, Possession. Anyways, I had the movie Posession win Movie of the Month for January, and this is also a very cool, very twisted, disturbing horror film starring Sam Neill and Isabel Adjani about a couple going through a bad breakup, and it is intense. It is like Marriage Story meets H.P. Lovecraft, and so I got Cayley to be back on that episode, and then we were joined by Bubba Wheat of Real Crime Scenes and It's Time to Rewind, host Richard Kirkham of the LAMBcast, and Matthew Simpson, fellow podcaster and film critic, and I'll post links in the show notes about where you can find the full episode for that one. So that's very cool. So yes, it's a Society and Possession double feature for Cinema Recall. So thank you very much for checking that out. And then before I go, I have something that I want to announce. So I got a message from Rob of the Bigger Movie Pod about a new charity event that both him and Matt of that podcast are doing. After the passing of their co-host and great friend, Destiny Dave, they want to do a charity event. And so what Matt and Rob are doing are very cool. They are going to be climbing the tallest peaks in Scotland to raise funds for cancer research. And this is a very cool thing because fuck cancer. And anything we can do to destroy cancer is going to be a great thing. And I apologize for swearing, but honestly, it's cancer. And yeah, fuck you, cancer. I don't care if I offend you because you're a bitch, you're an asshole, and yeah, fuck off. So if you want to tell cancer to fuck off, please help donate to their charity. I'll post links in the show notes about where you can go to do that, and I think that'll be a very fun thing. But let's not dawdle on anymore. Let's get on to our show, our double feature episodes featuring Cayley from OnceOverwithCayley. Hope you enjoy this. I love you all very, very much. Thank you for your support, and we'll be back again soon. All right, laters. Bye.
What's up, Internet? Welcome to Once Over. I'm Cayley, and with me today, I have the Vern from Cinema Recall, and we're going to be giving the once over to Society. There will be spoilers.
Give it a good once over.
Giving us the once over.
Giving him the once over.
Give me a once over.
Down to give us the once over.
For a routine once over.
Once over.
Oh, just once over lightly.
The Vern, I am so happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here, and I'm very happy and excited that you're bringing me to my first ever, orgy.
What is the password?
Orgy.
But I'm more concerned that you brought along like my parents and my sister into this whole thing here. I don't know.
I mean, I felt like it needed to be a little different. So
I understand the whole like, family affair or something. I just wasn't sure. I thought it was like role playing, but seeing them there was a little bit creepy and weird. But I'm excited to be here on the show with you.
we are talking about Society, which came out in 1989 and was directed by the amazing Brian Usna. I think that the whole reason that you and I decided to start talking about this movie is actually because it has Heidi Kozak in it.
You were on an episode of our podcast talking about Dogtooth. When talking about the themes of Dogtooth and all things going on with there, it reminded one of us about Society. I'm not quite sure if you mentioned it or I mentioned it, but the elements that happened with that family in Dogtooth very much reminded me of Society, and it's one that we want to cover.
It definitely has a lot of the same kind of paranoia feelings. And I think that is exactly what got us into talking about this, which is because there's some incestual stuff going on in both this and in Dogtooth.
Yes.
In a little bit different ways, but we'll get into all of that. So definitely kind of a similar vibe. Are you a big Brian Usna fan? Is it just this movie that you like?
The only thing I know about Brian Usna is that he was the producer of Reanimator and From Beyond, from Stuart Gordon. I know that he originally was going to produce and make Honey, I Shrunk the Kids with Stuart Gordon directing that, but somehow that project fell through and it got released by Disney and director Joe Johnston. Although I really would love to see a Brian Usna made movie with Stuart Gordon doing Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So badly want to see that version.
Brian Usna loves his body horror, and this is the perfect example of that. He basically reverse engineered the film based upon the special effects that he was building with effects director Screaming Mad George to do all of these amazing effects. So you get this awesome 80s body horror, which he also does a little bit of in his movie The Dentist.
I have seen The Dentist before.
Yeah.
But when I watched it for a older podcast called Larry the Unwanted, and I was not paying attention to who the director of was that. I know it had Corbin Person. That's the only thing I remember from that movie. That was an insane feature. Yeah.
Of course, this movie follows around Bill, who is played by Billy Warlock. He is a Beverly Hills teenager. He is paranoid that he is different from his family.
I mean, it's not the name Billy Warlock there. I mean, I know that's not his character's name, but can I just mention how cool that name Billy Warlock is?
It's a really cool name.
I know he was like on Baywatch.
Yep, he was on Baywatch. I want to say he was also on a soap opera.
Yeah, he was. I think like As the World Turns. But yeah.
Not a lot of other movies, if I remember correctly.
Not really. He just did mostly just TV shows. Days of Our Lives was the soap opera, along with General Hospital. He didn't really have a lot of films. I mean, he was in Halloween 2 because his dad is Dick Warlock, who was the Michael Myers in Halloween 2, Brutal Hot Shots, Baywatch Picnic at Malibu Pier. Ooh. Yeah, but mostly just
the Baywatches, obviously.
TV shows, direct-to-DVD movies, stuff like that, but that's really about it.
He in this film is very different than his parents and his sister, who are all part of the wealthy elite. I think that the first 2/3 of this film do a really great job of building up the paranoia that he kind of experiences in his life. And that leads us into the final act, which, of course, is the most infamous of final acts, I think, in almost any movie ever. You can't talk about this film without talking about the shunting, without talking about the disgusting stuff that we will get into as we continue talking. The beginning of the film, it opens up with him in kind of a nightmarish little scene where he is carrying around a knife. Everything is kind of blue in color.
Yes.
He gets snapped out of that nightmarish scene when his mom says, "Bill," and he kind of gets snapped out of it. And then we go into him talking with his therapist about how his life is like a nightmare.
Ben Slack.
Yes, Ben Slack plays Dr. Cleveland, who's the therapist. Ben Slack actually has a ton of small roles in a bunch of other movies. He's in Times Square, which is the movie that's directed by Alan Moyle, who also did Empire Records. I love Empire Records. Times Square is like 1,000 times better than Empire Records.
Really?
It's so good. It's like a legitimately good movie, not just a nostalgia good movie. But he's also in Bachelor Party. I think he's in Serpico. So he's got a bunch of small roles and stuff. Billy kind of tells a bunch of the story about what's going on to him to his therapist, but it becomes very clear relatively early on that his therapist might not always be so trustworthy. And again, that just adds to Billy's paranoia throughout the film.
It's perfectly normal to experience a certain irrational fear. It's no more than a stage.
We get introduced also to Billy's sister, Jenny.
Well, before we do get into the sister part, I do want to make one small comment, because after he's had that nightmare, or we're not quite sure if it's nightmare or not, is woke up by his mother, we do get this very odd credit sequence, which, you know, has all the cast members, and with like these weird images, you're not quite sure exactly what you're seeing. And I remember the first time I'm seeing this movie, you're looking at these images in the background and you're not quite sure what it is, but it just doesn't seem right. And they're having this very like calm music, almost sounds like a Tiny Tim type of thing, you know.
The music there is actually the Eton Boating song, which is a song that is from a very prestigious college. So we're already getting into this like elitism, classism that we know we're going to be talking about in the film because we've seen it. But it's kind of subtly hinting in that those are the things that are happening. So it's that song or that music, but with different lyrics that are about society.
In a weird way too, Cayley, it kind of reminds me of like the opening of Heathers, where it has that very calm, dreamy light sequence happening with like these like upper scale women walk in and they're crushing flowers. Very similar tones, I feel like, are happening in both movies.
I feel like that is very accurate. I did not think about that. And of course, again, we now know, having seen this movie, that opening sequence is going to be the shunt that is going to be the climax of the film.
I was kind of worried too that when Brian Usna uses something like that, if it's going to like spoil the movie too much. Because when I first saw the movie, it's not so much because it's kind of like, you know, it's showing things that you're not quite understanding. The second time you see the movie, you know exactly what that is. But it's just weird how he puts that images in that.
This is a movie that I don't think that you can really spoil. I mean, I really think that even if you haven't seen this movie and you're watching the Vern and I talk about it right now, you're still going to enjoy it just as much because it is so mind-bogglingly, hilariously amazing. It's just a fun one.
And almost in a way too, without the crazy special effects and the shunting scene, this is a kind of a good soap opera movie in a way. Like all the actors are doing it reminds me very much of like Twin Peaks, just with like body horror elements added to it. It feels like David Cronenberg and David Lynch got together and made a movie together, and their baby was Brian Usna.
One of my favorite movie comparisons that I've seen is that this should be called Eyes Wide Shunt.
Oh, fuck yes.
I was like, that's the best thing that I've ever heard in my life.
That is badass. Oh,
yes, that's 100%. So accurate. So let's get into Billy's life a little bit. So he has a sister named Jenny, who's played by Patrice Jennings. She had a boyfriend who was named David Blanchard, played by Tim Bartel. We get to see that Blanchard is going and stalking Jenny. He shows up in her closet, and he clearly wants to tell her something because they've broken up. We're kind of led as the audience to think that he is like crazy ex-boyfriend, but we will soon find out that he is not so much crazy ex-boyfriend, but rather trying to warn her.
Planted bug in her earrings and try to inspire her that way.
She is getting ready because she is about to have her coming out party, her debutante ball. She is becoming a member of society, of the high class.
You should be getting ready. You know Judge Carter will be there tonight.
So a lot of what we get to see with her is her being kind of conceited. We get to see her looking in the mirror and getting ready. One of the first things that we get to see that lets us know that this is going to be a body horror film is that when Bill is zipping up her dress to get her ready, her back starts pulsing and it's all sweaty.
Something wrong?
Yeah. And I know that, earlier in the movie that he woke up from that nightmare and he's always has these feelings of delusions going on. I just took that as him being delusional because he's had issues with that before and just add more to that.
You don't know at this point at all if he is the crazy one or if everybody else is the crazy one. The next crazy thing that happens, we get to see a full-on backward body distortion scene of Jenny. So this is the shower scene.
Yes, where you can kind of see her breasts coming out her back. Everything's from the front is now in the back. It reminds me totally of like President Scroob in Spaceballs.
Yes,
Turns around is like, why didn't anyone tell me my ass was so big? And so I don't know. Maybe Brian Usna was watching Spaceballs, but I'm gonna put that on a 17, 18-year-old girl.
I do know that Usna actually decided to add that scene into the film. Originally, that wasn't going to be there, but he felt like something crazier needed to happen earlier on in the movie because really not a lot happens during the first 2/3.
And I liked that. I really
do too.
liked that. I don't want to have too much of it up front because it just kind of ruins the surprise of it. I'll get more into how I think this movie should have been marketed, but I do agree with Usna on that one that doing something crazy in the beginning parts is a good setup. Also, I like the fact too, when you do later on, you hear the coming out party. I'm glad it's just stuff you hear. I thought that was actually really kind of a brilliant thing for using it to do. And I get too, it's the 80s. There's not going to be able to put like cameras in, there's their wardrobe or whatnot. I know they can do that shit now. In fact, this movie cannot really be made today now, really.
Nope.
I think it's perfect for that 80s zeitgeist. We had the Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and we had all these shows that really glamorize wealth and society. We had shows like Dallas and Dynasty that really put that type of like elite person up there. Wall Street with Greed is Good. People were really getting more into that sort of thing. And I think this movie is a great satire of it. And that's one of the reasons why this movie probably wasn't successful here in the US when it came out, because we wanted to live that version. We wanted to live that lifestyle. And here's a movie that's sort of like commenting on it and satirizing it and criticizing it. And yet we still want to be a part of it. We want to be part of society. So when anyone like skewers us about it, that's when things get crazy.
This movie is literally about the upper class deplorables. We didn't want to think about them as deplorables at the time, but it's about the upper class deplorables wanting to feed on the lower class, literally. And I think you're totally right. We in the United States were just not ready for that, unfortunately. Now I think we're much more supportive of it.
Well, we're definitely much more supportive of people eating the rich. Look at movies like Triangle of Sadness.
Yep. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. We're also introduced at this point in the film to Bill's cheerleader girlfriend, Shauna, who's played by Heidi Kozak, who's also in Slumber Party Massacre 2.
That's what it was. That's the connection there with Heidi Kozak. I forgot what Slumber Party Massacre she was in. Was the first one? Was the second one with the dude with the guitar, the Andrew Dice Clay killer? I never thought I'd see like Andrew Dice Clay as a killer, but if you want to see Andrew Dice Clay as a killer, Slumber Party Massacre 2.
Yes. Yeah, she's one of the singing girls. She does all the singing. Her character is a little interesting for me here. I understand that Bill probably needed to have a girlfriend character, like we needed a little bit of the sex appeal. We also needed Shauna to drive forward the plot because Shauna is constantly trying to get Bill to want to become hip and cool and a member of society. Shauna's really like, oh, we have to go to the cool kid's birthday party. We have to get invited to this.
You'll get us invited to Ted Ferguson's party. I can't believe we were left out.
We have to look nice. We have to be perfect. But I don't feel like she was super well developed other than that.
I do agree. I think that she's just sort of like, as I said before, the way to get the plot moving forward. She's kind of forgotten about usually like halfway through the movie a little bit. But in a way too, be what we know what happens to Billy at the end of this, if she was just planted there. It kind of reminds me of like the Truman Show, where
Yeah.
they planted in the Laura Linney character as his wife type of thing, where she's there to lead him to all these events and all these things happening. Like, this was set from the very beginning, and she was there to control the situation and all that stuff.
I actually just watched this movie 2 times, and it's funny that you said that she gets forgotten about. I don't know what happens to her. I don't know the end of her character arc.
She was upset with Billy
Yes.
for flirting with that one girl, and I had to write down
Clarissa.
that.
We possibly can.
Devin Dasquez, yeah.
Devin Dasquez, Playboy Playmate of the Month in 1985, I think.
She sure was. Yep.
Yes. Very cool. And then after that, there's a scene on the beach
where Shauna gets squirted in the face with some sunscreen.
Yes, sure. Yep. There's 2 little kids, and then he meets Clarissa.
One of the kids is actually Brian Usna's kid.
Well, that made sense. Hey,
Yeah.
your dad's working. Just
Yep.
come on to the beach there. Yeah. I wonder when he actually showed him that movie.
Yeah.
This is what happens to you if you don't get straight A's.
Yeah.
And then
Shauna basically her role is kind of to show that we should care about fitting in. And because this is a satire, she's kind of an annoying character. So I don't want to fit in because she does want to fit in, is kind of where I get led down with her. Also at the beach, though, this is the first time that we do get introduced to the Clarissa character, who is the character with all of the sex appeal.
Don't get too hot.
I like how this scene is done because the way that we meet Clarissa, again, she squirts Bill in the face with some sunscreen, and then she walks away, and it's a very exotic moment. And he goes over to ask Ted Ferguson, the cool kid, if he can go to his party. And as he's turning to walk over to talk with Ted Ferguson, he bumps into who we later find out is Clarissa's bulky, big mother.
And she seems to have some like brain damage.
Yes.
With her.
And in that scene, she's a literal barrier to him moving forward. Now, this is particularly interesting because we do later learn that Clarissa is actually a member of society. I think it's a little bit vague, but in my interpretation of the film, I think Clarissa is a member of society, which means that her mom is also a member of society, more than likely.
Also, too, her mother acts very different, almost as she's like in a stage.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's too early to mention this in this synopsis of this movie, but every time Bill tries to get like a help from somebody, that person ends up dead.
Yep.
But then later on, they come back, and this adds to his paranoia, where maybe they weren't dead to begin with, maybe they're still alive. And I still think that Clarissa's mother is someone that society did change and kill, because they do bring these other people back, and they brought back that character, and just made me think that, well, wait a minute here now, was she a sacrifice for
Interesting.
the society people before? I don't know. I'm reaching here just because of the way she just doesn't talk, and she's just stoic, very much like a zombie. I think this is someone that did figure out the rules, did figure out the outcome society, and they didn't want to affect her daughter for this, so they just had her become comatose. I don't know, folks.
I think that's a really cool interpretation. How do you think then? Okay, so Clarissa's mom is very obsessed with hair. There's one scene where she coughs up a hairball. There's another scene where she's caressing Milo, who is one of Bill's friends' hair all the time. Do you think that there's any interpretation to be had with that? That's a hard one.
Possibly she is trying to infuse with youth, because we know near the end how they can infuse with things, and so maybe that's just her way of trying to infuse. Maybe she's trying to do her own and try to feed off the life of that, but she doesn't have much power because she's a new replicate of what she was before in the past, and so she doesn't have quite the powers that society has to do the power grabbing, the power sucking of the poor and whatnot. Like I said before, folks, I'm reaching. The great thing about this movie is that you can make up your own wild interpretations of this.
It's so true. It's so true. While he's at the beach, David Blanchard actually pulls Bill aside and says, I got to show you something.
I do want to mention something real quickly. Before that, we do have this debate that goes on between Billy Warlock's character and this very snobby guy that his girlfriend's trying to get invited to his party. And he won the debate, which I think was set up by the school and by society so that they were able to get invited to that rich kid's party. And
yes.
So, yeah.
And that debate is also interesting. The topic of the debate is actually school uniforms.
I mean, just imagine everybody walking around in those idiotic clothes. Like Marty over here is wearing right now.
So we're talking again about things that mostly only elitists would think about. You know, a lot of the time when we're talking about school uniforms, we're talking about private schools. A lot of the time when we're talking about school uniforms, it's because we want to make everybody be exactly the same, or because we don't want people to have individuality. So I did think it was particularly interesting with that debate that they are talking about uniforms.
And that also introduces the Torsten character, who is there obviously to distract him. You know, she's wearing a nice outfit with skirts, and her legs opening and closing, doing the whole Sharon Stone basic instinct thing. It's great. And he gets flustered about the whole thing, not quite sure how to answer it. But he still manages to somewhat win the debate despite everything that's happening. And I still think that once we learn about that character, the guy who's debating, the guy with the glasses, is that Milo? I forgot the name already.
Petrie is his last. Yes.
Sorry. Martin Petrie. Sorry, Martin, whose name should have been Milo because you look like a Milo with those circular glasses and that hairdo, okay, that look a little... I'm almost a Milo too with my glasses as well, but you had the blonde hair. Blonde hair makes you a Milo, okay?
He is a Milo. I don't even remember why we started talking about him. Now I'm just thinking about how he's a Milo.
We're past the beach scene, and we're at the party now.
Yes. Okay. So, well, we're still at the beach scene actually, because we need to talk about that David Blanchard actually pulls Bill aside at the beach because he is dying to tell Bill something. Earlier in the film, we saw Bill kicking him out because Jenny didn't want him around.
Look, something very weird is going on here.
We assumed at this point that David Blanchard is a stalker ex-boyfriend, but it turns out that he has a recorder that contains recordings of Billy's family doing some crazy stuff.
Listen. I remember my own coming out. I was so excited.
Then you can do it with women as well as men.
Of course.
You know the schedule. First we dine, then copulation. With someone your own age first. Then with your mother and me. Then in comes the host.
Oh my gosh, it's so big. Oh, well, we'll work this, and oh, I can't believe we're going to be doing this. And just hearing the stuff and knowing that Billy's hearing his parents and his sister being involved with this, you're thinking, oh, wow, this family is some really deep, orgy shit.
There's some crazy incest going on in this family. And this is the first time for me that I felt like, okay, Bill is definitely not insane. Something real is happening. I was like, oh my God, what is he going to do? You know? So his response to this is that he's like, oh my God, I have to go back and figure out what is going on.
He was pissed at him first for recording it. And he punched him, attacked him, and it made it sound like you're making this shit up here. You're just trying to make me more paranoid because at this point in the film, this character, Billy Wild's character, doesn't quite know what's real and what's not real. When he's at the doctor's office, he takes a bite of a peach, and the peach has all these worms in there too, and he's having all these crazy nightmares. He found his sister in a shower with boobs, but on their back, and when he opened the door, she was just naked. And I thought it was kind of weird for him to be. First of all, I'm going to go back to that scene for 1 second there because I thought it was weird that he goes into her room to grab a suntan lotion. And this girl has a shower, a private bathroom and shower, which I guess all rich people have. But instead of just grabbing the lotion and leaving, he goes into the bathroom to see his sister, which is really weird. I've had to borrow stuff from my sister in the bathroom. I had to open the door, grab the stuff, and then just leave. I didn't go towards the shower. And I'm not quite sure why he had to go to the shower. Maybe they have this like type of like weird close relationship that I never had with my sister. Maybe these are different in Beverly Hills. I don't know, folks. All right.
This is just what the wealthy elite do. I'll never understand it.
Yeah, and when I see the boobs in the back, I'm thinking, did I take acid today? I don't think I did. But they just gotta just back away from it. Never mention that shit ever again. All right. So sorry, continue. We're on the beach. He's hearing about the weird couplings happening with their family. Yeah.
So he's trying to tell everybody, hey, I heard this tape. It's completely crazy. So he's telling Shauna something is really weird that's going on between Jenny and my parents. I don't know what's going on. He tries to go tell Dr. Cleveland, his therapist. He gives Dr. Cleveland a copy of the tape. He's very hesitant to do that, but he eventually does it. Dr. Cleveland basically says, I listened to the tape and it was totally normal.
I remember my own coming out. God, I was so excited.
You mean I can dance with anyone I want?
Of course.
I don't understand.
Really, you're the crazy one. You should learn how to accept society's rules, including privacy. You shouldn't be recording things like this.
Yeah, if you break the rules, there are consequences, is what he says to him later on too. Because I know when he goes back and plays the tape, everything sounds normal. The daughter's like, oh, I can dance with this guy, with this guy. And dad's like, yes, you're going to dance with me first. The parents have this like very waspy sort of like prestige way of talking. They're very close to their daughter. There's one sequence where he comes home and the parents are just in bed. Dad's topless, massaging his daughter. They're all in bed.
They're all wearing like a silky bathrobes also. It's a very uncomfortable scene. It's like the perfect amount of discomfort in that scene. That's how uncomfortable I want to be.
I think that even without any of the crazy special effects and the shunting going on here, this is a very disturbing look at class and rich folks and everything. Yeah, as we made the connections between this and Dogtooth, because their parents have this weird connection going on with their kids, and the kids seem to be going along with it. It seems to be like the daughter is going on with this too, and she's trying to get her brother to be involved with this as well, and it's just very crazy.
Billy believes that the tape that the doctor has now is a messed with tape. He thinks something is wrong with it because he heard the tape originally. So he tries to go get another copy of the tape from Blanchard, but he discovers that Blanchard has been in a car wreck and that he's dead. I think that's some of the only blood that we see in the film. There's no blood during any of the shunting scenes, and I can't think of any other bloody moments.
I think you might be right. You're right. I can't think of anything else that happens with that. Yeah,
it's interesting to have a horror movie, and in particular a body horror movie, that just has none of that at all, and yet I was equally terrified.
I like the fact too that we're going to get into that crazy sequence at the end, and I don't think Brian Usna really want to have a lot of like gore moments, because in most horror movies you gotta have that gore moment happening all the time, and if you spoil that, it's not going to make the ending as impactful. Yeah. So I like the fact too, it's just a simple car accident. I like the fact too that was nothing crazy. And at this time too, he's seen as like this stalker, this crazy person that's been trying to stalk Jenny for like,
harass Jenny.
So him dying seems fit because he's paranoid, he's delusional, and then he had an accident, and then that was it. So there's no question about how he died. There's no other mystery. No one's going to try and solve this, except our lead character, who knows that something's just not right, and he wants to just continue on with the investigation.
People are so nonchalant about Blanchard's death that when Bill goes to tell his parents and Jenny that Blanchard is dead.
So, what are you going to wear?
You mean to the funeral?
No, you weirdo. To the Ferguson's party.
They say, oh yeah, we already know. Oh, and also, what are you going to wear to Ferguson's party? They don't care at all. And it's like, he's like, but Jenny, like, this is a guy you used to date. I understand maybe you guys weren't on the best terms at the end of his life, but, have a heart or something.
This is why this reminds me so much of Heathers, because in the sequence after Martha Dumpstock kills herself, and Shannon Doherty comes over and she finds the news about it. She's like, "Oh, is that pate over there?" You know, it's like no one seems to care about if a person is below society's rankings, then there seems to be less of a person, and the only way that person can become popular is through like that's the way they become up in society. So I found it to be kind of a fascinating comparison.
Now we get to Ferguson's party. Clarissa comes up and starts dancing with Bill. There was one really interesting moment here for me, which is that Clarissa and Bill are kind of like ribbing each other a little bit. And Clarissa's like, "Well, where's Shauna?" Then she's like, "Well, you know, I thought you were going with Shauna." Bill's response to that is, "What, do you want my mother's maiden name also?" Clarissa very, very quickly and very quietly says,
"Real or adopted?"
Real or adopted, implying that his mother is not his real mother. And we know that he already, because of the beginning, because of the first kind of act of the film, we already know that he feels like maybe he might be adopted just because he feels so different. He has that standard teenager, I don't belong, so maybe I'm adopted. And maybe that's why I'm the black sheep of the family. And then we get Clarissa hinting at it even more. And it's such a tiny, tiny moment. And you're so distracted by Clarissa's beauty that it's very easy to miss.
That is probably true because I'm probably still in the same days that Billy was, that this gorgeous girl is talking to me, kind of forget about what your own name was or who your real parents are. So in this case right here, Cayley, is Clarissa also adopted from society as well? Has she been like adopted? Has she been able to sort of like accept it and go along with it, and that's why she's not being consumed, because she's able to bring other people to this? I think it's her job to try and find other people and bring them in. Like, I think that Shauna is the person that kind of starts them out. I'm pretty sure Shauna and Billy were probably like high school sweethearts or childhood sweethearts, and then now when Bill sees this gorgeous Clarissa who is like 10 times hotter than Shauna was, like, oh wow, that's actually what a woman is now. All right, that's what I need to be going for now. That's and I'm pretty sure Clarissa's there to help bring him more into society, but then she's
definitely the seductress.
Yes.
Yes, she is absolutely the seductress. She leads him into a tent where Ferguson is. Ferguson and Bill kind of get into it.
You know the schedule. First, we dined. Then I your sister. And then everybody else got so turned on, they too.
Ferguson is like, "Oh yeah, I banged your sister, and so did everybody else."
And at this point, too, you're thinking that, oh wow, they're just having like sex parties right there.
Yeah.
Nothing just crazy just yet. But even that little right there is it's kind of like weird that his parents are having, his sisters are, and the judge and other people in this society are having like these weird, wild sex parties going on.
I will tell you that this movie, more than anything else, terrified me of being invited to any sort of underground orgy. I will never go to one. This is I'm too afraid of the shunting.
Yeah, that's true. Unless you have really good food there.
What the hell is this place? What did you bring me to?
This is a buffet.
Well, I can see that it's a buffet, but why is there a buffet at a goddamn orgy, Frank?
Well, you don't want to bang on an empty stomach, do you?
I don't want to bang any of these people anyway. They're all paunchy and weird and old.
All right, well, that would be the exception.
Food there, like lobster. I wouldn't be like catered by like a really fancy restaurant. I want Wolfgang Puck to cater an orgy for me if I'm gonna go. All right,
that's the requirement.
We got to take a short break, but Cinema Recall will be right back after these ad spots.
Hello again, me popsicles, and welcome to Season 2 of Science Fiction Remnant.
Go ahead and grab your multipass, a drink, and sit back with us and geek out about sci-fi.
Let's pick each other's brain. We want you to be part of our intimate conversation about science fiction topics.
And hang around to the end of the episodes for the real-world science that was inspired by your favorite science fiction.
Let's do this. Let's talk about science fiction topics in books, movies, TV shows, and games.
At Science Fiction Remnant, you are invited to listen in.
Listen now on Apple Podcasts,
Spotify, Anchor,
Audible, GoodPods,
or whatever you listen to podcasts.
You can catch the video pods on our YouTube a month later.
And don't forget your multipass, you me popsicles.
Science Fiction Remnant is brought to you by the hashtag This Is Sci-Fi. No cat pony cuties were harmed in the making of this commercial. Ba, 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 ba.
Get access to episodes early, uncut video footage, and bonus shows by becoming a Patreon member. Go to patreon.com/cinemarecallpod. And for just $3 a month, you will help support our independent podcast. Thank you so much. And now, back to the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LAMBcast. This is episode 761, and I'm your host, Richard Kirkham from Kirkham A Movie A Day. You would think that people would want something warm and fuzzy for a January winter film. Well, that's not what you're going to get today, as we explore the 1981 marriage drama horror film, Posession. Hosting in just a few minutes is the Vern of Cinema Recall, who championed this film to victory with a vigorous online campaign. Welcome back, Vern.
Welcome, everybody.
In the spirit of one of the scenes of the film, I'll refer to Matthew Simpson of the Awesome Friday podcast, and who has joined me almost every Movie of the Month episode this year, as my monthly visitor. Hi, Matthew.
Hi. And to be fair, given that it's January, I have joined you for every Movie of the Month this year.
This year for sure. As far as I know, there are no comic books or graphic novels featuring Posession, but Bubba Wheat from It's Time to Rewind podcast has joined us anyway. Thanks for joining us, Bubba Wheat.
Cue unnerving synthwave music.
And finally, we're joined by a newcomer. I have no idea if she has a tentacle fetish, but we'll probably find out. Welcome, Cayley.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, since this is your first time on the show?
Yeah, I would love to. You know, I fell in love with movies at a young age, but I just recently got into reviewing them. And I love the idea of Kirkham A Movie A Day, because that is exactly what got me into reviewing movies. I actually started out in 2021. I set a goal for myself. I realized that I had been watching all of the same movies again and again. You know, we get into these habits of rewatching movies. And so in 2021, I said to myself, I am going to watch 365 movies that I have never seen before. And I met that goal in 2021. So in 2022, I started reviewing movies because I figured I had seen quite a few of them.
Excellent. It sounds like you had a good start on this. You know, it's always good to start with a goal in mind and then see if you can meet that goal and then follow it up with whatever comes along. Are you still doing a movie a day and writing about it every day?
I wish that I could, but I am absolutely not. Nowadays, most of my energy goes into watching the movies and then editing reviews of them. So
I know the feeling.
The priorities have shifted, yes.
I understand completely, yes. When I first started my project, I did every day a film and posted on it. That lasted for the first 3 months, and then after that, it's just films that I see in theaters. So I restricted myself a little bit. But we appreciate you joining us this week. The Movie of the Month is always fun. We get all kinds of films being suggested. And the winner this month was Posession from 1981. The Vern was the champion of the film. I'm going to turn the show over to him. Vern, it's up to you. Take it away.
All right. I feel like we should do this whole review as, like, Sam Neill from that movie and just be like, what does this movie mean? Tell me, why are you feeling this? But I'm not going to do that, but I feel like I should to make it more exciting. Posession, Movie of the Month, written and directed by Andrzej Sawalski. And I'll give a little feedback about Sawalski before we talk about the film. Polish filmmaker who made the films The Devil and On the Silver Globe, both films which were banned in Poland, I think after 18 months of shooting on the Silver Globe. A censor came by and said the movie was anti-communist
and had all the sets burned, and the movie was never done. So he was shunned in Poland. At the time he was married, his wife left him for another man. So he had no country, he had no family, and so they found a way for him to move to Berlin to make Posession. And if you don't know what Posession is about, it is about a couple who are going through a bad breakup, and Sam Neill, Isabella Johnny are the married couple. Sam Neill starts to suspect that his wife is leaving him for another man, hires a investigator to find out what happens, and then more things happen. There are so many themes in this movie, and I don't want to stop our guest's thoughts on this. I'm actually going to start with Cayley, our newcomer to the LAMBcast, and just tell me real briefly, where did you see this movie? And just give me your first general impressions. I just want to get general impressions about this movie from everyone, but I'll start with you, Cayley.
Yeah, absolutely. So I first saw this movie probably about 10 years ago, and I was just one of those movies that everybody always talks about it. You feel like you're supposed to see it, so I finally saw it, and then I loved it, but I hadn't watched it again since. And Vern, what I noticed so much is exactly the joke that you just made, which is that I had forgotten that about 90% of this movie is just screaming. It's just Sam Neill and Isabella just screaming at the top of their lungs at each other. And I had a great time rewatching it, so I'm super pumped that we are talking about this one today.
Very cool. Love that. Bubba Wheat, is this your first time watching this, or have you seen this before?
Yeah, I had never seen this movie before. I knew absolutely nothing about it, so I went in completely blind. Other than, well, I mean, it was a Vern pick, so that kind of told me everything that I needed to know. And, seeing Sam Neill, I've seen unhinged Sam Neill, so I kind of, I didn't know exactly where it was going, but it didn't surprise me too much. But I will say that I feel like my threshold for weirdness has gone down as I've aged, and I think that this movie was just a little bit too weird for me this time around. I think maybe if I would have seen it 20 years ago, I would have absolutely loved it. But, nowadays I was just like, what the hell is going on? And I'm sure that there's meanings to be derived of it, in there if you look deeply enough. But I was just like, oh my gosh, this is something else.
Very cool. And we're definitely going to get more into thoughts about the themes and messages, motifs of this movie. But let's hear from you, Matthew. What were your thoughts initially of Posession? Have you seen this before? Is this a first-time watch for you?
This was a first-time watch for me. It's definitely been like a hole in my personal canon for quite a long time. And yeah, I watched it for the first time last night. And yeah, I can confirm that it is definitely a movie I've seen now.
Yes. Beautiful.
And
beautiful.
Yeah, that's all I got for now. We'll come back later.
Okay, Richard, just general thoughts. This is your first time watch for you as well?
It was a first time watch for me. I didn't know anything about the movie. I hadn't heard of the movie, which is strange because I lived through that era, and I'm surprised that it wasn't on my radar at some point. Both of the actors I knew reasonably well, so I anticipated something that was going to be at a certain level of quality and performance statue. Yeah, I think Bubba Wheat and I are on the same path here. I feel a little bit like I might have been more accepting of some of the weirdness when I was younger and be more willing to dive into the film and see things in a more abstract way. However, I think I was just overwhelmed by how different the movie was from what I was kind of expecting. So it was an experience. There were things about it that I admired, and we'll talk about those kinds of things as we go along. I'm unlike Cayley. I'm not going to think fondly about this 10 years from now and rewatch it. If I came across it again and somebody else was watching it, I might sit down with them and watch it, but I'm not going to be seeking it out myself because it It's not my cup of tea, as they say.
So here's the thing. I first saw this movie in theaters. There's a local theater by me called the Trilon, and they were going to show a 35 millimeter print of this movie. Now, the only thing I knew about this movie before going in was the subway scene, because I've seen that on a whole bunch of other like horror list countdowns, and I just knew that context. It's almost like seeing the shower scene from Psycho, but without seeing the whole movie. So I knew about that subway scene, and I thought, all right, this looks intense and crazy. And also around the same time, too, when I saw this movie in 35 millimeter, the movie Climax came out, and there is a scene where one of the actors has the same freak-out moment in that movie as Isabelle Adjani has in Posession. So went to see it in theaters, and I was just totally, like, blown away by the very crazy yelling action style of Sam Neill and Isabelle Adjani. I mean, they are doing theatric acting. And when watching reviews and interviews, a lot of my notes come from the Kino Corner, which is a great show on YouTube. Check that out. When he discussed the acting style that both Adjani and Sam Neill does, that's a very common acting style that's done in Poland. And the director, and I'm sorry, I've got to pull up his name again, Andrzej Zawalski, wanted to really capture that broad theatrical style of acting. And you see this in all these other films, including The Devil and On the Silver Globe, where actors express more with their bodies. And doing so, it makes sort of sense because this is a couple going through a bad breakup. So all of their emotions and their languages and their antics are going to be very broad and practical. And I guess this makes sense, too, for people who are kind of going through a breakup at the time. And plus, we should mention, too, that this movie is set during Berlin when there was East and West Germany. And I think the separation of both Anna and Mark sort of mirrors that separation that was going on in Germany. And I know this is something that's going on at the time of Zawalski's life with his wife leaving him. So this is very like personal film that was going on as well. And yeah, let's get into some of the thoughts about kind of like the acting style. I'll go into more like what happens in the plot later on, because it does seem kind of like strange, because when you first watch this movie, you're not even knowing that this is a horror film. If you watch this movie for the first time without even seeing like trailers or knowing that this was on Shudder, would you even consider this to be a horror film? This looks like more of like a relationship drama. I try to tell people this is like Marriage Story or Kramer versus Kramer if made by H.P. Lovecraft. So I don't know. Matthew, let me get your thoughts on some of the acting style on this.
It's a lot. It's a lot of acting. It's,
yeah, but do you consider that broad? Oh, sorry.
They're very big. They're very big performances. Very what's the right word here? Emotive performances. I actually think the performances are generally pretty good. I think that Isabelle Adjani is low key, actually high key, great in the film.
Yeah.
But it is a lot of yelling. There's a lot going on. Whereas it's subtext on its sleeve, and I can see why. I can see why it's divisive. I can see why people both really like it and maybe not. I land somewhere in the middle overall, but I don't think the acting. I think that the acting works for Adjani, and I think that Sam Neill is a little too much for me. I think is where I land.
Right out there. I mean, yeah, because when the movie premiered at Cannes, it had both a lot of boos and cheers after it was screened. Isabelle Adjani did go on to win Best Actress at the Cannes Film Festival that year. And originally, Judy Davis was casted to be in Posession, but dropped out. And I'm glad she did, because I thought Isabelle Adjani did great in that. Bubbleweed, just, let me hear your thoughts about the kind of acting on this one.
Yeah, I think that's the acting on, both. I would say all three actors is definitely kind of over the top. I think especially Heinrich is, whenever Sam Neill first gets to him, like, he is a trip.
Oh, yeah, because when Mark first discovers that his wife is leaving him, he gets this phone call from Heinrich saying that your wife is with me now, let her go. And then when he goes to see him, he's got a lot of this like Sprech movements as well. Cayley, I want to just touch briefly with you about the theme sort of like West and East Berlin going on, West and East Germany, and sort of the themes of that being part of the story. And
so I'm glad that you asked me that, because I absolutely love the idea of us getting to see the wall. So of course this was before the wall came down in Berlin. And so we start out the movie with Mark, who is a spy, and he's returning home to West Berlin. And we can see the wall both outside of his apartment, which is very modern and new comparatively. And then we also get to later see the wall from Anna's new apartment, which has become her kind of hideaway. And that apartment is completely the opposite. And it very much divides, East and West Berlin. And I think that is so extremely important to the central theme of the film, which is what makes the over-the-top acting sort of work. I think I'm always interested in the idea of wanting to flee the scary place. And in this movie, we get to literally see the wall as a constant reminder to the fact that this is not only an undiluted relationship drama, but also just about so much more.
Yeah, very much so. Richard, do you think the director is trying to sort of like convey elements? Because like I said before, here's a director who got kicked out of his country and his marriage was ended, and this film is sort of representation of that. Did you see that in the film when you were watching it, or?
Well, I think that there are things in this that obviously seem very personal to him. I'm not familiar with his work. I haven't seen any of his other films. I did a little bit of that background research after having seen the film to see what his origins were, and I could understand how you would feel maybe isolated and rejected in a situation where he comes from, where the filmmaking community that he was in basically excludes him because of the political consequences, and of course at the same time that his marriage has fallen apart. I could see why this would come from the head of somebody who is going through that kind of experience. Now, how literal any of this is hard to say. I doubt that very much that he sees his wife as being a murderess, but the idea that there is a monster that is taken over as a substitute for him and becomes strangely a repulsive, more desirable lover than he is. Man, if this was happening to me and my wife was leaving me for somebody else, that's exactly how I would imagine it. There must be something out there with a hypnotic power that is overwhelming, and it's got to be the worst thing in the world. So maybe there's something about that's going on in this particular film. The stuff about East and West Berlin, I think, is an interesting tie-in. It's a good setting because we do get kind of stark differences in the way people live. Although I never had the impression that Anna's new apartment is in East Berlin, but it probably represents that East Berlin part of the world, because it is old and decrepit and not really a desirable place to be. And even though the apartment that she and Mark shared before is modern and new, it feels a little bit stark and cold, which is the way I think both of these characters come across, pretty stark and cold. And there are other things to talk about. I don't want to get off on those tangents and without giving you a chance to talk about them, but I'm not sure I understand why the spy element is in this at all. And the pink socks at the end, I'm going, I know that referred to something that happened earlier. I'm not sure what the hell is going on and why it matters, but there it is right in front of me.
I think at the beginning of the movie, Mark is having an interview with all of his other government officials.
Yeah, the exit interview on his.
I imagine they're trying to have him find this individual with the pink socks.
And I think jumping in here a little bit, I think just reading into it more that that element is also like a metaphor for the marriage, because they're trying to find a replacement for him, a replacement for him as this spy, as this to get with this contact. And then at the end, their contact says that he won't accept any other replacement. He wants to have Sam Neill Mark back as the point of contact. And that's the same with Mark's point of view from the marriage. He doesn't want a replacement. He wants Anna back.
That's a good point there too. Like, the government wants to find almost their replacement behalf of him, and also Anna wants to find a new lover and replacement in Mark, and so that's very cool. All I know that when watching this movie for the first time, I knew it was going to be a horror film, but the way that they introduced the horror was actually kind of good. Because when watching this, I thought the horror was mostly going to be involving Mark and Anna, because there are some violent sequences that happen between Mark and Anna in this movie, with a lot of like fighting and abuse there. So I thought the horror was going to be on that side. And I don't know if we want to get into like spoilers now or later, but I think now we could probably get into some few spoilers here. But when watching this for the first time here, did any of you sort of like know what the horror was going to be when you first watched this, or were you expecting, like I was the first time, just thinking that the horror is going to be involving just these two characters?
Well, let me point out that I'm a person who looks at the credits when they go up on the screen, and when I saw the name Carlo Rambaldi, I said, okay, something icky is going to show up here.
Good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Richard, because Carlo Rambaldi, he also did the creature effects work on Dune and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and he created the creature for E.T.
Yeah. And like I said, on the horror element, I'm going to kind of echo a point that I've made before, and those of you who've heard me make this argument before, I apologize for repeating it. I don't think this is a horror film, just like yes. I don't think Jaws is a horror film. I think that Jaws is a thriller with a horror element. This is a domestic drama with a horror element, but it's not horrifying in the sense that there's, the fear and dread of the monster coming to get you, even though there is literally a monster that comes to get you at one point. That never felt to me like that was what the story was about. The story was all about the decay of the relationship between these two people and what it was doing to them, and it was turning them into, whatever their problems were before, they were getting worse.
Right.
I couldn't agree with that more, Richard. I think that at some point I saw that somebody else had commented that this movie was just a marriage story from 2019, but written by Lovecraft. And that is very much what it feels like. It does not feel like a horror movie at all. And for me, actually, I just think that the title of the movie makes this even more interesting. This is telling us we are going into a possession movie. This is telling us this is likely going to be horror. And then you start watching it and you're like, wait a second, that's not what this is. This is relationship drama.
And I feel like the word possession is sort of like the need that each person has to sort of like get something that they sort of want. Like, Anna can't really control her lust for this other being. And I also think that Mark has a possession to have like a very traditional type of like marriage, and he wants a certain type of woman. So as the movie progresses, we do find out what Anna's secret lover is, because Mark has hired a private investigator to find out what's been going on, spies on her, and we do get the reveal of the creature. It's got these tentacle monsters and whatnot on her, and I always felt that was just like a representation of her lust and desire. That's just kind of my own take on it. But also around the same time too, Mark has found another sort of like doppelganger
and Helen, Bob's school teacher, their son's school teacher, and she's exactly like Anna, but has like green eyes and softer brown hair, and so that's like sort of like his desire. And plus, Helen is much more agreeable and a little bit more loving than Anna is, and I'm also getting kind of confused too because the moment when Anna describes to Mark the miscarriage, the famous subway scene that happens, was that what she oozes out of her body? I just assumed that is what becomes the creature, or was that tentacle creature made the being in her? But I also know too that this is very much kind of like a metaphor as well. And this is the movie, I'll be honest with you folks, I don't understand a lot of it. A lot of stuff I'm telling you is stuff that I researched later on. But God damn it, the fact that it's just on screen is just amazing. And I love the fact too that there's like different themes of this. Matthew, we haven't heard from you in a while, buddy, so I just want to kind of get your takes on the stuff that I've been mentioning.
I mean, I'm just going to minorly disagree here in that this is definitely a horror movie. There's a tentacle monster and weird violent sex. It is a horror. It is also a relationship drama because movies can contain multitudes, but it is definitely a horror movie.
Well, I definitely understand why people say it's a horror movie. I just never had the feeling as I'm watching it of horror. I had a feeling of repulsion a couple of times, but it was not the same kind of thing that it's not the anxiety that typically comes with a horror film. It's the depression that comes with the divorce story or the separation story that's going on here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step all over your comment.
That's okay. I get it. The thing I like to think about with horror movies in particular is a thing I like to remember is that horror is not necessarily about what scares you. And these scenes, the what the characters go through is horrific, and that makes it a horror movie for me. Even though I would agree I more feel like repulsion than like anxiety or horror myself, but that doesn't mean it's not a horror film to me. Does that make sense? I feel like that makes sense.
It does, and I'm glad you brought up the repulsion, because it's been said that this movie Possession is sort of like an homage to Roman Polanski's Repulsion, as well as David Cronenberg's The Brood. And I think if you watch both of those movies and you see the character from Repulsion and the male character from The Brood and how they're reacting to their situations, that it kind of mirrors both Mark and Anna for Possession in a weird way.
Yeah. And I'll say too that like this is definitely a movie that I think wears its subtext on its sleeve to the point where like as I was watching it, and I'd never seen it before. I didn't do any reading about it ahead of time. I went in like as blind as possible. And about halfway through, I'm like, is this guy going through a divorce or something? like it's fairly apparent what's going on in his personal life to some degree. And when you read that after the fact, you're like, oh yeah, of course he was going through a divorce, and of course it was messy and terrible. So yeah, it's I think that basically every element in it lends itself to that sort of, for lack of a better word, that sort of like violent separation, that sort of emotionally violent separation between two people. Everything from the way that Mark is abusive to the way that oh wow, I've totally blanked on her character.
And Anna,
yeah, has like found another man, but is sort of being obtuse about it. To the setting of East and West Berlin, everything about it is lends itself into that sort of again violent, like emotional separation.
And there were definitely a bunch of symbolic elements that I noticed while watching the movie, and I was like, I don't understand what that means on a first viewing, but I definitely know that this was done on purpose. Even like smaller things, like the fact that Anna is always wearing the same blue dress, and it's it's in various degrees of disarray. Like I think the first 3 times after she leaves and she comes back, it's like the dress seems to be more and more dirty and ragged, and then the next several times that she comes back, it seems like it's been cleaned, but it's still, she still has just the one single outfit. And also things like the state of Mark's room, in various parts of the movie, sometimes it's in just complete disarray with stuff everywhere all over the floor, and other times there's definitely a few times where it's like spotless. I think it's typically whenever after the teacher, which I completely missed the part where she, like, I saw the scene where, like, she slipped him a piece of paper and he said, Bob asks what was that, and he says that it's her name, but I didn't catch her name being spoken anywhere in the film, unless I just happened to be looking away for a moment and missed it. But it seems like whenever she has been there, the room is clean. And it's this difference where, you can also tell that it's a story of divorce from the man's point of view, because the woman is the villain, and then he finds a replacement for his wife, and she is like the perfect angel. She is the savior character that saves Bob at the end.
That's a kind of fascinating point there, but I want your take on that, Cayley. Do you consider, like, Anna to be sort of like the villain in the story, and do you agree that this is a movie written by a guy who's going through the divorce? Does he frame Anna to be the villain in this one?
It's interesting. I think that everybody is quite villainous in this movie.
Sure.
I do think, though, that the idea of the character of Helen, the teacher, being the ideal wife is extremely important. So effectively what Mark has done is he has said, I can't acknowledge the fact that my wife is leaving me. And so because of that, here I will create this doppelganger of her. She will look exactly like my wife. She will have all of the good qualities that I love. However, she will clean the house, and she will be obedient, and she will be quiet, and she won't yell, and we won't have these horrible outbursts with each other. And that is a stunning and thoughtful thing that I think that escapes genders when it comes to a breakup. I think that a lot of the time, anybody of any gender, when they're going through a breakup, they kind of say to themselves, boy, I wish that I could have all these good qualities of my ex-significant other and then put them into this person who has these great qualities. And I think that the movie does a great job of exploring that topic.
That's a good point there, Cayley. And I think the director was trying to sort of like say that Helen, the teacher, sort of like represents sort of like communism. It is like seems like good and nice, but it's like supposed to be the biasness of evil. And I know the director at the big time was making all these like anti-communist films and everything, and now you got the character of Helen sort of like embodying that. I'm not saying I necessarily agree or disagree with that. I'm stating what the director has said with that. And I think the whole notion of just like doppelgangers is sort of like a fascinating motif in this movie. Now, especially because at the start of the movie too, when Mark first finds about the breakup, there's a long moment where he doesn't shave and is just distraught and doesn't want to move out of the house. And it's not until like Anna kind of slaps him in the face that he kind of gets over that and is able to like try to find out a new life for himself. And also to mention this too, that when Mark does find out about the creature and about the murders that his wife has done, he decides to, help her out with it, and is like covering bodies and stuff like that there too. And is he now just accepting of her new love? Is he trying to help her move on so that he can move on with Helen or so? Richard, thoughts?
Well, it's obvious that he is going through a huge withdrawal in his relationship with Anna. The whole sequence that where he says to the woman that he's at the place that he's staying, "How long have I been here?" And she says 3 weeks. That whole period is like, he's gone through some drug withdrawal while he's going through this. His wife has left him, and he doesn't have the thing that he needs, that he's addicted to, her presence. Even though they were not satisfying to each other, her presence was important to him, and its absence is overwhelming him. By the way, there are things about the way this story is told that are incoherent when it comes to trying to make this into an actual series of events, because you can't lead a life the way these two people have led with a child and function in any sort of way whatsoever. So that's one of the things that makes me think that this is really kind of their internalization. They're visualizing their internal feelings in this situation, as opposed to actually going through something. It's like a nightmare of what your divorce is like, and all these things are happening in the nightmare, and you feel it, but it's not. And I gotta be honest, if we're seeing it from Mark's point of view, his problem is at the beginning is he can't understand why the two of them can't get together. I think he starts off pretty sympathetic. I don't know that she ever comes across to me as evil per se. Certainly indifferent and cruel. There is one moment of cruelty that I thought was obvious, but that felt to me like one of those moments where there really is an entity that's possessing her and speaking through her. But their inability to find what it is wrong in their relationship that leaves them both unsatisfied, that's what the real monster is. That they can't.
Yeah, and I think that's visualized pretty well. Again, I think it's one of those subtle moments that I notice. But whenever the two of them are naked in bed together, talking about how they're sexually uninterested in each other, it's shot from it's just heading from just above the breasts up. It's not salacious at all. It is very chaste in the framing. But then later on, whenever he is in the bed with the teacher, in a very similar moment, then it's shot where where the breasts are visible, and even after that, whenever Bob wakes up screaming, which I also have to say that it's a very much me thing, but I have a hard time thinking of Bob as the name of a child.
Yeah.
Yes,
agreed.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But I also think that, Bob, again, in terms of telling the story from their point of view, it's like Bob only exists whenever they need him to. Like he's only there whenever he needs to be like a bargaining chip in their conversation. And I think in a lot of bad divorces, that's probably very true to life.
Fair enough there. And I want to just get your thoughts here, Matthew. When after Mark finds out about the creature and is helping her destroy or hide the evidence and everything like that, they're two. Is he more accepting of her life or not?
I mean, no.
Okay.
And that's where we're going to end things today, folks. I apologize immensely, but if you want to know what's happening on the rest of this episode about Posession, click on that link and you'll be able to watch the full episode of the LAMBcast, where we talk more about what happens in Posession. And while you're at it, click on the other link to find out what happens to the rest of the conversation Cayley and I had about the movie Society. So you got two full other great podcasts to check out, and I hope you do. They're a lot of fun, and I hope you will listen and subscribe to them. All right, folks, now comes the time where I give a quick shout out to all of our wonderful Patreon members. Again, patreon.com/cinemaricopod. So in no special order here, I gotta thank Jeanette Miller. She's found on the Twitter sphere at AKA Jeanette. Jen McQuaid from Shot and Applaud. Thank you very much, Jen. Jason Soto from Rabbit Hole Podcast. Thank you very much, Jason Soto. Steve W. Steve, you don't have a website or any social media channels, but Steve, I love you. Thank you so much. I want to thank Matt and Ashley from Ashley at the Movies. Check out their most recent episode about Flow. That's very cool. I got to thank Donnie Roberts on the Twitter sphere at Unreal Goals, although I think he changed it to something else, and I can't quite remember the name. But Donnie, he's our co-host for Donnie's Choice. Great guy. And then got to thank Lyndon Castro from Shot and Applaud. Again, these people are wonderful. And I love you all right now for listening. Please check us out everywhere you find podcasts, on your social media apps. We're on Instagram. We're on Blue Sky. We're on the Twitter. We're on Threads, everywhere. Anyways, folks, love you all very much, and I will see you soon. Bye.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.